Serious, what's the creepiest / scariest thing you've ever experienced in your life? When I was 10, I was home alone one night. My mom was divorced and she was working nights at the time. This was in the late 90s in a quiet town in Sweden, so we didn't really have a habit of locking the door. I was in bed, hadn't fallen asleep yet. All of a sudden, the front door opens and someone walks in. It's too early for my mom to get home. I sit up and outside of my room, in the kitchen, I can just about make out the shape of a very tall to me man. He stops dead in his tracks before casually saying hello. I turn on my nightlight and the dude immediately starts making small talk to avoid freaking me out, mentioning my mom by name and things like that, so at least I knew he was an acquaintance of hers. Still, something felt wrong. He was talking about my mom's old antique flintlock ornaments, saying she had promised to sell them to him, and he kept looking around my room, spotted my Nintendo 64, and asked if I was thinking about selling it. I wasn't. He told me he was only here because his mom had a bad stomach and needed to use the bathroom. I just nodded and said okay. He leaves the room and opens the front door and I can hear someone enter and she's speaking in a low voice, so I can't really tell, but I think it was an older woman. He pops his head back into my room and tells me I can go back to sleep and that he'll be out in no time. I'm a little scared still, so I do as he says and I turn off the light and lay back down. For almost half an hour I can hear him moving around in our apartment before there's a flush of the toilet, and shortly after I hear the front door close. I get up, make sure there's no one else in the apartment, then I lock the front door and go back to sleep. Next morning when I wake up, my mom is wondering about some missing things. The Frikastola VCR, a couple of gold rings and my mom's silk pajamas. Standing on the front stoop of my apartment at 2 AM smoking a cigarette. Dead freaking silence the entire time I was standing there. All at once a train horn blows, the little 5-year-old girl next door screams and a wind gust comes out of nowhere slamming the open door against my shoulder. I swear to God for exactly 1 second I thought I was being attacked by a ghost. My heart was pounding, and I thought I was gonna cry. That shoot probably took 2 years off of my life. For the record, little girl screamed probably cause her and her mama always stayed up late and were probably playing. When I was 16, I was in a summer work exchange in Quebec, Canada. One night, I invited a friend from the program to stay over at my billet family's home for the night. We slept downstairs in the basement, as they had a couch and a spare mattress down there. The actual event is quite fuzzy, but I remember waking up, sensing something was wrong. I looked up, and there was a shadowy figure / person standing above me, and the figure grabbed my breast. I didn't know how to react in my brain fog, and it seems the figure went back upstairs and out the front door. I laid there for a moment in the darkness and noted the stuffed animal I slept with I was young, and it was from the boyfriend at the time, was several feet away from the head of the mattress. Once I was slightly more coherent, I began to shake and knew I had to let the billet parents know. I went up the stairs to the main floor and noticed the front door was wide open, with the sun just rising. This is when I realized that something freaky had happened. I hurried up to the top floor to where the bedrooms were and whipped on the light of the parents' room. I tried to explain that someone had been in the house and grabbed me, but keep in mind, I was a 16-year-old kid in a huge panic. My many years of French immersion in school did not teach me the French words for Bob or home invasion. The billet mother seemed pretty pissed that I had woken them up. It took a lot of broken French and hand gestures to get the point across. They did contact the local police, and they sent an officer over who thankfully spoke English. Nothing ever did come from it, and my friend who had slept over slept through the entire thing. Almost 15 years later, and it still sticks with me. Alright, I don't usually reply to this stuff, but I got one. I'm about 16 at the time, just relaxing at home alone watching TV in the dark with my bulldog named Holly. So we're laying together on the couch sharing snacks or whatever, and all of a sudden Holly gets up and slowly walks towards the hallway by the TV hunched over in attack mode. And I see his hair on his back stand up, and at the same time so does mine. and am covered in goosebumps and fear. I slowly stood up too, and we both just looked into the hallway, which seemed darker than the rest of the house, and it just felt like something was there looking back. A moment later it passed, Holly eases up, and I run and turn every light on in the house. I still get chills thinking about it. I used to pet Holly and wonder if he still thought about that night too, but he was such a happy fat dog it probably never bothered him. He died in 2010 at the age of 12. Back in the 1980s, growing up in suburban Chicago, my brother, some friends and I got into using the Ouija board. Of course, when our mom found out, she quickly condemned it. Like that was going to stop us. One afternoon we were in my bedroom on the second floor with brother and a few friends with the light slow messing with our homemade Ouija board. We were pretty young and getting ourselves pretty amped up about the spirit world when all of a sudden there was someone slamming on the bedroom window. Mind you, we were on the second floor, so this couldn't just be some random person walking by. We all turned to look, and there it was, a scary face staring at us through the window. With no time to focus on its face, it took all of about a second for us to jump up and run downstairs. When we get down there, the front door opens up and there it is, inside our house. A few seconds later it's pulling a stocking off its head. Guess who it is? Mom. She knew what we were up to. Went to the garage, got a ladder, put the stocking on her head, beat on our window, and took about 10 years off all of our lives. She was laughing hysterically. Good one, Mom. Having a black bear come up to the car I was in when I was 11 because he could smell my aunt's dog and wanted lunch. Stuck his head in the open moonroof and everything. Was terrifying. I got into a fight with my boyfriend while over the phone, and because I was a stupid teenager, I decided to walk to his house in the middle of the night. Problem is, that meant passing through a dimly lit, questionable part of town. But of course, who gives a frick? Thought my 18-year-old self as I trudged onward, even though my face was streaked with tears. I got a nosebleed too, because I was stressed, so blood dribbled down my sweater, but I was so edgy I just kept going. Suddenly I came across a group of guys who had a ladder propped up against a wall. Right on the other side was one of those wealthy houses that were part of a subdivision. I froze. They hadn't noticed me, probably 4 or 5 of them, with one guy already climbing the ladder. But one of them turned his head and looked straight at me. I remember my heart pounding, my mind screaming to run. Even though my feet wouldn't move, I thought I was going to be killed. The guy let out a yelp. This got the attention of the others, and I heard a lot of panicked expletives. Turns out seeing a bloody girl in the middle of nowhere will deter any criminal. It didn't help that I have stereotypical Asian features, complete with the Heim cut with bangs that reach my eyes. In hindsight, to them, I looked like something out of a horror movie, even though I was in my pajamas. The guy fell off the ladder, and along with the rest, jumped into their car and drove off. For the first time I was thankful of my spontaneous nosebleeds. Creepiest, I was in New York taking a training course, and I was up late writing a paper. When I finished, it was about 3 AM, so I decided to go downtown, find a Kinkus, print the paper, and then go to a diner and study before class. I was standing on the platform waiting when suddenly I saw a massive black man, around 64, in a yellow leather suit with matching fedora, and the whites of his eyes were blood red. He's standing about a meter away from me, just staring at me. He didn't make any noise, he just sort of showed up. I got on the subway, and so did he, sitting across from me, staring directly at me. No blinking, no speaking, just staring until I got off. Scariest, one night, my wife was in Europe on a business trip, so my daughter, who was about 10 years old at the time, and I were alone in the house. I got up at about 2 AM, because I could not sleep. I went into the living room to sit down, but I didn't turn on the lights, because I didn't want to wake my daughter, but she was actually awake and thought it would be fun to creep up behind me and surprise me. I walked into the living room. I looked at the plate glass window leading to the balcony and saw someone standing behind me. I yelled and swung around, but at the last split second realized it was my daughter. If my instincts had been any slower, I would have punched my daughter in the face with full force. I'm not sure which is scarier, being scared in the first place, or almost belting my little girl in the face. I've told this before. When I was maybe 6 or 7, I was staying the night at my grandparents' house. I was on the couch trying to sleep when I heard whispering. They had a painting of my aunt hanging on the wall in the living room, and it was talking to me. Nothing creepy though. It was talking the way my aunt would talk to me, asking me if I was behaving, and typical aunt talk. She tells me to wake my grandfather up because she needs to talk to him. I did, and when he realized she wasn't there, he began scolding me. In between threats and insults, he noticed someone moving outside the window. He grabbed his pistol and told me to stay in the room with my grandmother. A minute or two later we hear a gunshot. Turns out there is a prison for young adults about 20 miles from where they live. 3 of them killed a guard and escaped. They were sizing the house up to take his truck and whatever they could, but he saw them first. Ended up shooting one of them in the shoulder. I have no idea why that freaking picture was talking to me. Thief never experienced ghosts before or since. Edit. Ghosts may have been a bad choice of words, because my aunt is still alive to this day. To clear up any confusion, I have no idea why the picture was talking to me. I cold heard a noise that woke me up, and in my half awake, child state of mind imagined the picture talking to me. Or it could have been a guardian angel. I personally believe the first one. Either way, nothing like that has happened to me or anyone in my family before or after this incident. Okay, so when I was a surgical resident, I went to assist in what's euphemistically called a harvest. A 9-year-old kid had been hit by a car and been pronounced brain dead. His family wanted his organs to go to good use, so we went there to collect the organs. He came in on a ventilator, but with his heart beating and alive appearing. We opened him up end to end, got ready to clamp off all the major organs, poured an ice, and then took them all out. I met a guy who got his kidney and another who got his liver. The liver guy would certainly be dead without it, and the kidney guy probably. His other kidney, and heart, and some of his gut all went to good uses. As much as I knew he was already dead, it was still really difficult to come to terms with. Definitely the most creepiest thing. I work in family medicine now. I guess it wouldn't be scary for me, but it was for my parents. I talked to my dead uncle when I was around 5 or 6. They thought I had an imaginary friend. Turns out when that imaginary friend happened to be named Uncle Ben, the hairs on the back of my parents' neck stood up. He had died around a year before I was born. He was also incredibly close to my father. And then there was this one time I was driving down this road in Hawaii. I was on a rather forlorn stretch when all of a sudden the temperature dropped from 80 degrees to around 50 degrees and the windows of my car fogged up greatly. I put on my hazards and started slowing to the side when all of a sudden it got to normal temperature again, and the windows defogged itself almost immediately. And it wasn't a typical kind of cold either. It had this kind of chill that I would feel during a windy snowy day in the Sierras, the kind that pierces jackets. I could see my breath too, so I definitely knew it was pretty cold. Yeah, that Hawaii incident definitely gave me the spooks. I had this dream that my brother killed someone and hid the body in our pool. It was in the winter and the tarp was on, so he was able to hide the body for some time. Eventually spring came, and he was trying to get the body out to hide it, but it was so waterlogged that it was falling apart in his hands. The freaky thing is how real it felt, and the amount of detail. It felt like I was actually living this in real life. I could remember news reports about the missing person, how I found out that he killed the man, my mom begging me not to report him to the police, the rotting flesh melting off the face of the dead person as he took it out of the pool, the police sirens, and it ended with me being so traumatized of what I saw I was placed in a mental health ward. I woke up crying, and it took hours for me to calm down and start my day. It took a day or two to finally understand and process it was a dream. It took months for me not to be scared of my brother. My brother is super chill and the person in the dream was the complete opposite of him in real life. It's weird to explain, but I felt that I had to learn how to trust him again. It's been years since that dream, but it was so real and lucid. I've never had such a lucid dream since, and I really hope I don't. Woke up in the middle of the night with an intense urge to pee, jumped out of bed, and ran to my bedroom door to find my 5-year-old daughter standing there with a blank look on what I could see of her hair-tossed face. We have a big house and the children are on the other end, and have never come to our room in the night like that. It wouldn't be ordinarily creepy, but it was very much situationally creepy. She said she just woke up from having a bad dream. I've seen how this plays out in the movies, so I told her not to turn the TV on and not to go back to her room. It was a good night to let her rest between us. Edit. Lord CUHV bad spelling. When I was 14, we lived in a 2-story apartment. I lived on the top floor, and the stairs to get up are really loud. One time I heard banging coming up the stairs, so I assumed it was my dad. At the time we had no other neighbors on this floor. Just to be sure, I checked through the peephole to see if I could get the door for him. Looking through, I saw a man in a ski mask looking down at the doorknob. It was summer and this happened in Texas, so this man was up to nothing good. I stumbled back from the door and grabbed my phone. I heard the door being forced up. I ran into the bathroom and locked the door with my phone and quickly dialed 911. I heard a lot of banging in the next room and glass shattering. After maybe 5 minutes, our officer came. The man was long gone. However, he broke a flat screen TV, 2 glass tables, family portraits, and our sliding door. Outside on the patio, the police found a crowbar. The man hasn't surfaced since. I got in a fairly bad car accident last year. I was driving with my brother, and we hit a tree going 75 miles per hour. Directly after impact, I sustained no head trauma, so I was conscious for the whole thing. However, my brother received a really nasty concussion which had him knocked out for upwards of 7 minutes. I just remember with very vivid clarity looking over at my brother and seeing him bloodied and slumped forward in his seat after the airbag deflated, and I poked him and called his name and he didn't respond, and I thought for hours we rode in different ambulances that I had killed my brother. Edit. For anyone interested, imga.com/gallery/hpzlg.